All right, let's get to work. Let's start talking a little bit about sculpting in Mudbox. Okay. Earlier, we spent some time kind of just looking at how the whole system works. Styles, would you do me a favor and just hit the first two lights on the row there? Thank you. So our goal is to really take these lumps of clay that we've been working with for the past couple minutes and really start to build on top of our little snail. Now I've already gone through and I've exported out my snail from Maya. So I'm going to get rid of my, I don't know what I'm going to call that, my little lump. Okay. So mine's on my desktop. Okay. OBJs are great, FBXs are great. Doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Just find a format that you like and then continue to use it. Okay. So I'm just opening that up here inside the app. Takes a second or two, a good beat. Or not. There we go. Ta-da! And here we go. We're off to the races. Okay. Now, if you had a little popover on your mesh that very clearly said, hey, there's some manifold issues and some geometry issues, just hit OK. You can keep working, okay? But these are small little technical errors on the mesh that Mudbox is saying kind of thumbs down to that it doesn't like. I would, if that was me, I'd go back to Maya and do a real legit investigation in those areas to see what's going on. It could be a barrier going forward on what you're able to make here in Mudbox. Could be, depending on the issue that's in front of you. Okay. So now that we're here in Mudbox, let's start talking a little bit about our process. We were exploring some tools, but there's actually some consideration that we need to be mindful of. And it has everything to do with how much geometry we're sculpting with and when we're choosing to go on to that next level. Okay? Far too often, the mistake that people make when they jump into these mesh sculpting tools is that they'll just hit, subdivide 8 times and they'll start working on a 10 million polygon mesh. That is a bad idea. Okay? Mo polys, mo problems. Okay? There's a time and a place for high resolution sculpting. Initially, when we start working and blocking out our sculptures here in Mudbox, we want to stay on this lowest level for as long as we can until the sculpture physically says, I need more geometry to get that level of detail that I'm trying to create. Okay? So here's my suggestion. Stay at the lowest level, the initial level, for as long as you can. Okay? I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger here. Now, at this level, there's some considerations that we need to have here. For me, I want to go in and start blocking out and figuring out certain details in here. For example, this bottom edge, I want it to be a little bit more sharp. The reference that I had, it's almost kind of like a thin, almost planar shape along the edge instead of this kind of bulbous, shape that I initially created over in Maya. Okay, so I need to go in and do some sculpting in here. I want to do all of this at this level. Now, one of the things that I like to remind people when they're starting this process is that it's okay to pretend, it's okay to project. Okay, we're not trying to do final, finished, crazy, polished work in the first setting. This is like animation. We have to go through a whole series of passes as we literally kind of chip away at our mesh. I like to pretend that I'm a classic sculptor in this process, right? If you consider the master sculptors in the fine art world, they're literally starting with a hunk of marble or maybe a lump of clay on their desk. And what are they doing? They're not trying to go in initially and sculpt every single pore on the skin or establish where the eyebrows are if they're doing the bust of someone's head, right? What they're doing is they're looking at basic shapes, planes, and volumes, okay? We need to do the exact same thing, okay? We need to really do a legit examination of the planes, okay? The surfaces that are being constructed by our geometry at this lowest resolution. Big picture, if it doesn't work, I want to do work in finger quotes, okay? If the mesh or the sculpture doesn't work at this lowest resolution, it's never going to work when you got 10 million polygons on it, right? It still has to be representative. It still has to look the way it's going to look at the end of the day. So chip away at it. Some passes, okay? All right, so I'm going to go into my sculpting tools. And there's a couple in here that I would really recommend that you start off with. First and foremost, I mentioned this earlier, the grab tool. I'm a big fan of the grab tool. The grab tool allows you to make pretty big sweeping changes if you allow it to your mesh. Okay? Specifically, I'm going to hold down the B key left click and drag, and now I can start moving things around. Okay. Now I'd like to work in symmetry a little bit here, so I want to hit undo. Symmetry is enabled, and let's go into the tool properties. Symmetry is enabled over here in your tool properties on the right hand side, and I'm just going to do local X. Okay. If you hover over it, you'll be able to see the symmetry planes. I think that's a viewport property that you can turn on. I never really have it on because I just want to get in here and work. Okay. Now what I'm trying to do as I go through this process is to create some planes. Okay. If your mesh is getting real lumpy, your brush is too small. If you're making big sweeping changes to your mesh, have a big brush. Don't try to do it with these smaller brushes. It's going to take away. Now notice that I'm grabbing the back of my shell here. But at times, depending on where I click, yeah, now I'm grabbing the actual snail and the shell at the exact same time. If you've separated your mesh out into a whole series of discontiguous pieces, there is some workflow modifiers that I would absolutely recommend that you check out, and it's called freezing. Okay, freezing allows us to go in and to basically turn off the influence of whatever sculpting brush that we're using in a certain area. There's actually a freeze brush, and it's way down here towards the end. It's this guy. Big picture idea, it's not masking. Okay, different thing. Okay, we want the freeze brush. Okay, and now I can go in, I can paint on the mesh, and wherever it is that Arctic blue, and yes, I think it's supposed to be like the Arctic blue. Okay, now my sculpting tools, or whatever tool that I'm working with, isn't going to influence that area. Okay, I can go in with my move tool again, and now same thing, but notice how I'm really, I think I have the underside, I'm grabbing the underside of my shell, which is why it's moving a little bit, but I can turn it off. Another cool way of working with the freeze command, selection move tools, check it out, we can actually grab faces, and if I double click on my shell, since it's a contiguous piece, I then can tell the computer to freeze that entire area. I believe it's under the edit, yep, the edit pull down menu, freeze selected. And it's going to take whatever is selected in your scene and it's going to shut it off, okay? And it's not going to be, kind of monkeyed with. Bloop. So now the whole thing is blue, and now I can guarantee that whatever I'm working on is not going to be influencing the shell of my snail. Okay. All right. So I think earlier one of the things I mentioned is that I wanted to make this a little bit. Oops. I still got the faces tool on. I'm going to go back into my grab tool. I like working with the grab tool. I'm a big fan of that grab tool. What's the keyboard shortcut for us to adjust the strength? M, yeah. And then left click and drag. What's going on? Of course, I'm not dragging anything at the moment. Okay. Let me just unfreeze. Oop. There we go. Now what was happening is I made my strength too small and I wasn't able to go in and get the result that I was looking for. Okay. Okay. Now, down here, if I wanted to make sure that I'm getting more of a planar shape, I'm just going to drag some stuff out. There we go. I'll push that down because I want the plane change to change as it runs down the slope here a little bit. And now I'm starting to block out a transition. You can almost kind of see it. It's right in here where my cursor is. You can start to see the shape change a little bit, and that's what we're after. Okay. And I'm just doing this with the grab tool. Nothing magical. Pulling out, then pushing other areas in. But I think there's going to come a time, and I think I may be at that time, when I want to start, when I want to start cleaning up this edge a little bit in here. Okay. Perhaps grab out some of the bottom. I'm doing this with a brush, or a mouse, which is never fun. There we go. Okay. So there's some other brushes that I would really recommend that you do a good look at, okay? The grab brush is very, very useful. I can't recommend using the grab brush enough. There are a couple other ones that I would definitely recommend that you look at. Another one is the smooth tool, okay? Now the smooth is going to try to average out the faces. This can be a very dangerous tool if you're not careful. With my brush size, at its current size, which is pretty big, the smooth tool is just completely ironing out all the work that I just accomplished, right? So in this particular situation, to get more of a planar shape in there, I need to start reducing the size of my brush to localize the impact of that brush on the area that I'm trying to change. So let me hit undo. You're going to be changing brushes often, or the size of brushes often. There we go. I'm just going to smooth it out that way, try to get a little bit more of a planar shape. If you continue to explore the different sculpt tools that we have down at the bottom, there's some good ones in here like flatten. Flatten may be a good one to use in this situation. It's going to try to push and pull all the verts to a consistent level. I'm going to make the size of my brush a little bit bigger, see if that gives me the result that I'm after. Yeah, there we go. Now I'm starting to get a harder edge. In addition, the pinch tool, check this action out. Now, the pinch tool is going to work, I think, pretty well in this area because it's going to start to pull the verts underneath the size of the brush to the center, right? So it's kind of like a vacuum cleaner. Everything's getting pulled into the center of the brush. And that can give us some nice hard edges. I have my strength down. I like keeping my strength pretty small as I'm working. FYI, you can also change the size and the strength over here too. 6 to 1, half a dozen to another. I'll make my brush a little bit bigger. Yeah, my strength has got to get cranked. There it is. Now it's giving me the result that I want. And I'm starting to get a little bit more of a hard edge transition. Turn your wireframes off from time to time, okay, and look at your mesh. I find that when you're sculpting, the wireframes, they are important, don't get me wrong, because we need to be aware of how all of our polygons are flowing across the surface of the mesh. But oftentimes, those lines are going to give us kind of a false read as to what actually it is that we're building. So turn them off. I actually like sculpting with them off in its entirety. So the pinch tool, great way to start creating some nice hard edges. Yeah, that's starting to work for me a little bit. Let's make the strength a little bit higher. Yep, now it's starting to pinch it out a little bit. Yeah, that's looking good, okay? And of course, naturally, I'd keep doing that throughout the entirety of my mesh. I don't have my symmetry on anymore, okay? This mesh, this is now just true sculpture at this point, right? We're not trying to create something that's compliant, that's going to work in a game engine. We're just trying to create something that's got a lot of information on it that we then can retopologize and extract back in Maya. And we're going to talk about that process here in a couple of weeks. It's kind of an intense process, okay? But I'm going to go out on a limb and say, yeah, I'm happy with this. This is starting to jive. At this level of detail, this is about as far as I can go, okay? Don't pop up into another level of detail until your sculpture can't accommodate the detail that you're trying to insert. Okay, does that make sense? You want to try to stay at the fewest number of polygons for as long as you can, because things are going to get pretty intense pretty quickly once we start subdividing. Let's just do it. Shift D. Now I have a whole bunch more polygons, and a lot of those smoothing errors are starting to get resolved. Now I got 14,000 polygons. You can actually do a tremendous amount of sculpting with 14,000 polygons, okay? Specifically, now you can start going in and blocking out details for the shell. The reference, of course, is going to help you out in that. The sculpt tool, if I make a really big brush here, the sculpt tool, with the strength slider as is, that's fun. Yeah! I actually really like that. That's a whole lot of fun, but unfortunately, it's not going to work for what we're going to do. So I need to just turn my strength down significantly. Oops, went too far. Okay, let's see where we're at. Yep, still too high. Yeah. There we go. I like to keep things pretty small when it comes to my strengths. That way I can control it. Let's do 0.25 per Tyler's suggestion. Yeah, and there it is. Now I can go in and start adding some shapes and some form. This is probably the time to turn my symmetry off, since snails, the shell is asymmetrical. But this is a great opportunity to start going in and changing things, okay? There's some other really great tools in here that I would recommend that you take a look at. Okay. Oh, went too far. The wax tool. The wax brush is pretty great. The wax brush has a slightly different fall off on it, okay? And my strength is super high. Let's put this back down to something pretty reasonable, like 0.25 again. Make my brush size a little smaller. Yeah. See how the wax tool almost kind of flattens things out? If you think of the shape of your brush like a circle, the wax is a little bit more square. Okay. If I wanted to pull out, or in this case, press in, I'm holding down the control key. Okay. Now we can make some pretty big changes. I like the wax brush. The wax brush works pretty well. I think if you look very carefully, and I forgot to mention this earlier, and I apologize, the icons of all of our sculpting tools down at the bottom are color coordinated. Has anyone figured out what the color code is? There's red and blue ones. Kinda. Let's expand on that a little bit. Red is out, and blue is in. Like, so red is like additive sculpting tools, and then the blue is subtractive sculpting tools, okay? The one exception, of course, is going to be the grab tool, which can do both, okay? Yeah. Some other really interesting ones in here that I hope that you continue to explore as you spend some time is bold, just kind of fun. So if you have a detail that you're looking to, of course, my strength is, there we go. Bold, just kind of fun. That's going to take the existing geometry and it's going to push it out, right? It's a little bit different feel than how just the regular sculpt tool works, but bulge and inflate, or and foamy are really cool ones to use. Sorry. Yeah. Foamy is just kind of a really soft inflation of the area, okay? So use these tools. There's some good stuff, and of course the pinch tool. I'm a big fan of pinch. This is how we get hard edges, okay? So if you wanted to do like the swirls of your shell, the pinch command, I mean that's going to get you that hard edge, okay? I made a soft valley, and then I brought that valley together with the pinch tool, okay? Yeah, there's some good stuff in here, okay? When you're starting to block out some of your details, remember to look at the reference. The reference is always going to be your guide. You're going to see so much more information in the reference than you are from your own imagination, okay? We're not necessarily trying to go for absolute photorealism, but we're looking for believability, okay? There's a lot of details that you're probably going to miss without looking at the reference. So at the very least, if you return back to Canvas here real fast, okay, things that I'm seeing in the reference that are important is this big swirl. I'm going to need to figure out how to do that, okay? The knife tool may be a great way to start to block all that out, right? The plane changes in here are important to establish. Keep it basic, keep it blocky, okay? In addition, this little lip going around the shell, that's an important part of detail that I think I'm going to want to try to look to add on here, okay? Let's go back and we can start exploring that real fast. Okay. Go ahead. Yep.
When I tried to use the knife tool, it's like really not smooth, even if you're at like surface level 4 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a knife, right?
Right, sure.
Yeah. So one of the,
And then smooth it.
yeah, you can smooth it out, and this actually kind of speaks to the flow of the geometry as well. If we turn the wireframes back on, if you look at the geometry, it's kind of going from screen left to screen right. If I try to cut diagonally across those polygons, it's going to look garbage. It's not going to look hot, okay? And we can deal with that at this level, at the sculpt level, right? If I was to do like Shift D and subdivide that a couple more times, okay? Now I got some more geometry, okay? A little bit better result. If I was to do another sculpt layer here, so now I'm at almost a mil polygons, okay? On my little iMac here, my performance is starting to go, but you know, it is doable. We're not going to be ending up with a 1,000,000 polygon mesh back in the game engine. This is all going to get dumped down into a lower resolution at the retopologizing stage. So ask yourself the question, when do I need to use the knife tool? If I'm cutting across the mesh, would it be better to do that level of detail and that edit at a higher subdivision level? So yeah, only your mesh and your topology can kind of give you the answer to that. So, all right, I'm going to go back down in my subdivisions. I'm hitting page 3 right now, or page down. And I think I'm going to go back down and chill out down here at level 2. Because I try to do as much work as I can on these lower levels as possible before I jump up into the higher levels. I think the big mistake is that we don't do enough work at the lower levels. So, oops. Let's turn on, make my brush a little bit bigger. Oops. Yeah, and my strength is way too high. It's 2.02. There we go. Okay. I wish I had my Cintiq out, because now I can start going in and sculpting this out. Now, there are some properties over here in our tool properties that you should be aware of. The one that I like is steady stroke. Steady stroke is really neat, okay? Because I've been struggling with my computer mouse trying to get a real nice consistent curve. But with steady stroke, see how I have that little arrow that pops up? Your brush is now going to drag behind that arrow. And you can start to slowly build out some nice consistent curves. One of the other things that you've got to keep in mind when you're sculpting is that at times maybe the better thing to do instead of pushing out is to push in. I'm trying to create a very small lip around the opening of my little snail shell here, okay? So maybe I hold down the control key and I push in, which will start to create a little dip on the other side of this lip that I'm making. I've gone a little too extreme in this area. Kind of starts to bottom out in a weird trough. So this is where smoothing really has a big role in what it is that we're doing. I've made an error here in my sculpt. I've gone a little too far in some areas, and I want to start to smooth it back out to get more of a consistent shape. Let's make my brush a little bit bigger. There we go. Now I'm starting to get that lip that I'm after. But I really don't like this trough that's ending up in there. Can you guys see it? Yeah, it's just a little too extreme. I like the size of the lip, but this down trough in here is too extreme. I want it to be a little bit more attenuated and smoothed out as it goes back to the rear of the shell. When you're smoothing, just don't like hold down the shift key and go like this. That's going to solve more problems than it's going to fix, okay? Be aware of what smoothing does. Now I'm going to hold down the shift key and fire off smoothing, but watch the direction that I'm taking my smooth, okay? This is what I don't want you to do. This is bad form, as they say. Just hold down the shift key and go. No, I'm zoomed in. A lot of folks, they do this, okay? And then they go, okay, now I got to rebuild that little lip, okay? I want to keep that little lip there that I created. That was working pretty well. So be patient with your smoothing and smooth in a direction. I'm going to put my cursor right at the beginning of where I want to smooth. Now I hold down shift and I'm going to smooth, left click and drag to the left. Same thing, nice and slow. I want to try to preserve this curvature in this plane that I created a minute ago. And I'm being very mindful, and that's starting to work. Now I'm starting to push out those polygons and change that transition. Okay? So be mindful of the direction that you're smoothing. The smooth is not an erase tool, okay? If I was sitting in front of a lump of clay, the smooth tool is kind of like the edge of my thumb, okay? If you've ever done traditional sculpting before with real clay, the edges of your thumb where you're actually pushing the clay away from the center, that's kind of like what the smooth tool is doing, right? We're kind of just pushing it back, trying to blend the transition between these separate planes, okay? In these lower resolutions, in these lower subdivision levels, spend time blocking out more of these extreme plane changes than thinking about details, okay? Details are going to come. In the first subdivision level, it's all about just blocking out the shape, right? Trying to figure out generally how is this thing going to look. Then we subdivide, Shift D, okay? We walk up into a new layer of detail, and that new layer of detail allows us to start looking at the primary forms, okay? These big plane changes are primary forms. Details like the scales, the little lines on the shells, those are tertiary forms. Those are like the third thing that we need to be looking at, right? Because we got to figure out what the overall shape of this thing is going to be before we can start, really kind of blocking it out and adding detail. Excuse me. I'm going to grab the flatten brush. Let's just see. Yeah, I'm flattening a little too much here. I think I'm going to go back in and add a little bit more volume on the inside. Push out these polygons. Yep, that's starting to look good. I mentioned this earlier, but if your sculpt is getting real lumpy, if it looks like a whole bunch of little pimples all over your mesh, your brush size is too small. Make it bigger. Turn down the strength. We slowly establish these details instead of going in and just blasting our mesh with a zillion polygons, okay? 3D art is a slow process, okay? Okay. Now, one of the things that I'm really focusing on down here at the bottom of my shell is the transition between the shell and the actual snail itself. If you think about it, this shell is going to have a little bit of a lip going all the way around it. Right down here at the boundary, okay, it's going to be a little bit thicker than it would in the center of the shell. This serves as an excellent transition point between these two different planes, okay? So I'm really making it extreme now, with the idea that maybe I can go back out and smooth that out here in a minute. Sometimes pushing in will help you understand the shape that it is that you're trying to make. Yeah, there we go. I kind of goofed here, but that's all right. Now I'm going to smooth back, 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 okay? Just slowly working across the mesh. I'm going to increase the size of my brush here for a second so I can smooth a little bit more of a larger area under the same strokes. And if I mess up, that's okay. There's always Command Z to undo. Or you just go in and add some more clay in there, right? Use your sculpting tools to start to continue to iron that out. But don't rush through this process. I think far too often I see folks in the sculpting world trying to hurry through and get to that 10 million polygon mesh to add the details, okay? If you set your foundation on stone, the rest of the sculpt is going to go a whole lot better. It really is, okay? Yep, I'm getting there. I'm getting there, okay? One of the other areas that I would really recommend that you look to doing, again, is going back to the whole freezing idea. I made some oopses, some mistakes. I really don't want to have my snail be influenced at all. So turn off the mesh, freeze it real fast. If you want to unfreeze it, hold down the control key and you'll thaw it. Maybe that's the better explanation for it. Freeze and thaw, okay? And that way, just very quickly go in, freeze that part of the mesh, and that way you won't accidentally mess with it, okay? Oh, on freezing, Of course, the control key will subtract it, but you can also invert the frozen bits, okay? Let's do edit, and then we'll do unfreeze all. So check this out. If you were trying to create a very specific pattern, like if you wanted a circle somewhere, maybe you're trying to create the illusion of a mouth or something, okay? Now, I have this circle up here at the top. You can invert your freezing, and now I can do whatever I want, right? So I can go and maybe grab the, let's do the flatten tool, excuse me. Let's do the flatten tool. And now I'm just influencing the area in the center. There we go. Go back to the traditional sculpt tool. Hold down the control key. I still got my steady stroke on. Yep. And now, check it out. I can make a hole right where I want to make it. Let's increase my, my strength here. There we go. Now you can see it a little bit easier. Yep. It's a great way to control what's going on. At times, sculpting feels a little uncontrollable, especially when we're initially starting to learn. So use these freezing commands. It really is helpful, because the last thing you want, you don't want to go in and accidentally mess up, you know, something that you've already done. That's the last thing you want. So freezing is helpful. It honestly is. Now I'm running out of time here as we're kind of getting towards the end of our class today, and I wanted just to spend a couple seconds talking about the rendering engine, okay? So for your homework this week, you're going to continue to sculpt on this, and this is just really an opportunity for us to learn Mudbox, and at the very least, get comfortable with the process of sculpting and using our tablets to push and pull all of this geometry around. For this week's homework assignment, our little snail is only going to live in Mudbox. We're not going to send it back to Maya, although you're more than welcome to if you'd like, but if you get a 10 million polygon mesh, that's going to be a barrier over in Maya, right? One that we're going to combat when we get to the retopologizing of all of this, right? So Mudbox actually has a really great, well, it's got a rendering engine, and keep in mind the whole purpose behind this is just to make simple, you know, illustrations of the sculptures in Mudbox. So it's not like phenomenal world class in any sense, but you can do it, right? All right. So check it out. We actually have some really cool viewport filters in here that I would encourage you to explore, okay? Like non-photorealistic, normal map, that's something different. You do ambient inclusion, no, everything's dark. Cavity, oh, let's turn these off, sorry. That's why it got strange all of a sudden. The one that I like the most is depth of field, okay? And you gotta make some property changes in here. Oops, focus, I'm clicking on the wrong one. Focus distance is the one I'm after. There we go. It's all black because of this other one. Sorry. There it is. So blur amount, focus distance. This is going to figure out, yeah, there we go. Now I'm figuring out what I want to have in focus. There we go. So point being, just play around with it. There's some fun things that you can do in here, okay? There's also a tone mapper, which is going to allow you to change the color profiles and the color curves and all that, okay? Now, when you're ready to make a small little picture, check it out. There's actually a save screen image. That's all we're really doing, okay? It's pretty basic. There's not like a, you know, you can create little movies, but that's not what we're after. In every sense, it turns into a what you see in the viewport is what you get, okay? So there's some viewport properties that I would recommend that you check out. Specifically, let's see, grid, turn off the grid. Almost always turn off the grid, okay? You can also go in and continue to customize the background gradient. I believe it's in the global properties that will allow you to change the background gradients. So you might want to check that out. And then when you're done, let's just do save screen image. Pretty straightforward. Save it. It honestly just takes a, let's just do Pat's. Oops. So it's not going to let me change the name of it. That was silly. And hopefully it saved on the desktop. Let's find out. Sure didn't. Let's go back into Mudbox and see what's going on. Oh, it put it in the update folder. Awesome. That's why it wasn't allowing me to change the name, because that's a read-only folder. Put mine on my desktop. There it is. Now it worked. And what we get is just a PNG file of our sculpture outside of Mudbox. Okay. This is really the extent how far we want to go for our assignment this week. Okay. So you're making a sculpture. Okay, making it entirely in Mudbox. Things are going to change. As I mentioned earlier, don't marry yourself to what you had done in Maya. That was just really an opportunity for us to block out some simple forms. Okay. Now that we have those simple forms, we can bring them over here and start up-rezzing and adding a tremendous amount of interior detail to it. The cool thing about working with snails or even just kind of organic creatures is that there's a lot of liberty on how these things look. But still use reference, use the pictures. There's small details in the pictures that are going to make your sculptures feel real. I highlighted one earlier for me. That's that small little lip I was making. The move tool very, very quickly allowed me to get that. You can see the lip here for the edge of the snail. I still got some work in there that I got to do. Okay. And then of course I still got to block out that spiral, which is kind of fun as well. Okay. So when you're done with this, do not give me your Mudbox file, okay? When you have millions of polygons in your Mudbox file, the file sizes at times can be pretty big, okay? Let's just do a file save. Let's see how big my Mudbox file is, okay? Yes, 41 megabytes, and I don't have a whole lot of info in mine, okay? So they can get pretty big. What you need to turn in for this assignment is just that. It's just your little render from Mudbox. Yes, sir?
This is the image I'm getting after I save it.
Okay. All right, cool. Let's go back into Mudbox, see what you got. Okay.
So, render.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
could be because of the multiple displays.
Could be. Could be. Taylor, the way to test it is turn off the Wacom, see what happens. Yeah. That could be it. It could be seeing your screen as one massive thing. Yeah, that may be it. I've never actually seen that bug pop up before. And here, if it keeps doing it, I mean, literally what Mudbox is doing here is just doing a screen grab, right? So if you can't, for whatever reason, save a screen grab in Mudbox. Yeah. Does anyone know the keyboard shortcut inside the Mac to take a screen grab? Yeah. Command-Shift-3 is going to take a screenshot of the entire application or the entire window, right? You can get a cool, fun sound. Here's what I would recommend that you do. Command-Shift-4, okay? Yeah, Command-Shift-4, your cursor changes to a little crosshairs. And now I can left-click and drag out a box and take a picture, okay? So here's Command-Shift-3. You have your menu buttons and all that jazz. And then Command-Shift-4 is just going to be a picture of your sculpture. Okay? Make sense? On your desktop. The screenshot should automatically be placed on your desktop. All right, questions, comments, concerns? Yes, ma'am?
Does Mudbox have any orthographic views?
Yes, it does. And they turn them off. And there's even a view cube here that you can turn on. But yes, it is there. I got to remember where it is. I never sculpt in orthographic views, but I can recognize that some people would want to do that. Oh boy, where is it? Hotkeys. Oh yeah. Yep. That's right. Spacebar gets a hotbox, and then what is it? I forget which one it is. Grid, smooth shade, switch view. There it is. Let's turn off tone mapper. Yeah.
And we should just save these as OBJs?
No, save. So do file save, scene as. It'll create a Mudbox file. Yeah. There was a way, and I apologize. Let's Let's get back into perspective. Your file type? Oh, that's just a file name. I had the exact same. Just get rid of .obj, and it'll save as a Mudbox files. Yep. Oh, I hope not. That's about the worst snail I've ever done. I've given up trying to do good art during lectures and stuff. It's just not possible. It's not possible. There was a while. I remember when I was first started teaching, I was like, I gotta make really great, demo projects, and I'm convinced most of my students just stood there, or sat there just watching me trying to make like perfect art, and it just never worked. So.
I get it though. You're like, otherwise, how will they believe?
It's like, how will they know that I can do this? It's like, well, it's not about me. It's not about my capacity to make good art. If you want me to see, if you want to see, and I'm actually going to probably continue to sculpt on my snail because I want to do this too. So I'll bring my snail with me to class next week, and we'll see what we all have. All right, folks. Good luck. We'll see you next week.